Brian Beatty. I'm the new owner of JDAir Parts as of last summer of 2024. I want to thank everybody for being a huge supporter and being one of our customers if you've bought products from us in the past, and thank you for looking at products if you choose to buy from us here into the future. Today is going to be a really fun video. We've had a lot of customers reach out to us and talk about how to install Tailwheel, which is one of our premier products, the Tailwheel upgrade that we have from the van stock item, as well as how to do ongoing maintenance. The ongoing maintenance is a huge part of a fully functional and correctly operating Tailwheel system, so we're going to go over that today. I first want to thank everybody again for supporting the transition. This is going to be the first of many videos that we're going to do for not only this type of product, but many more of our existing and future products. So I want to thank everybody who's purchased from us in the past, and I hope that you consider buying in the future, and you're excited as we are to see what's coming. As I mentioned, today's project is going to be to talk about when you receive your Tailwheel setup and then how we go about installing it in the plane, and then we're going to incorporate a little bit of the ongoing maintenance with it. As you can see behind me is an aircraft that we have set up that is set up for a existing oil change. So when you do an oil change, that's when we recommend doing a Tailwheel maintenance, somewhere between 25 and 50 hours. Excellent way to maintain the quality and to maintain proper function with that is to make sure that it's properly lubricated. You don't have debris, things like oil, dirt, dust, sand, which can definitely build up inside of our bearing setup and build up along the shaft. And so we're going to go through how to maintain that. And again, as you can see, we're draining the oil on the aircraft now, and we have it propped up on either sawhorses or some kind of a padded stool, which you can see behind me is the way we have this set up. So that's the best time to do it. It takes probably no more than about 20 minutes to maintenance the Tailwheel. So it's an excellent time to do that and make sure that your Tailwheel functions correctly. So if you have purchased any Tailwheel products from us in the past, you have received probably something that looks very similar to this. We sell this Tailwheel fork in both powder-coated white and black. I have with me here today our standard RV yoke. These yokes we manufacture for both the regular RV 4, 6, 7, 9, and those come in this configuration. We also manufacture it for the 14, which is a slightly different angle. Just recently we have started offering it for the Thorpe T18 as well. So if you've received that or looking to have that product on your airplane, we're happy to walk you through that process to do the switch on the Thorpe as well. This here is a precision welded and manufactured part, and these two pieces, while they can function independently, you can have other setups with them, they are designed specifically to work together. The close tolerances and the way that we've designed it is for the best possible operation of a Tailwheel, and that's why we combine these, and typically if you run them together, you will notice far superior performance. So again, this is the same shaft diameter that you would have on the normal Tailwheel from the factory. However, what we've done is we've upgraded the yoke component. The standard vans has a brass bushing inside, which functions fine. Over time, you get debris, rocks, things in there, and that bushing wears out. We have a dual bearing system on the internal part of this. This is a machined bell housing that we weld a shaft at the correct angle for proper geometry on the RVs. So this is a sealed bearing on the bottom, and inside you can see that it's a rod bearing system. And when these typically get put together, that close tolerance is a very, very, very smooth fit and operation. So ultimately, when you receive this, there's a few things that we try and do before we ship them out. First and foremost, you will notice the pin. You get a package that looks like this, and you can either choose the single control arm or we have the double control arm. That's something you specify when you purchase it. It will come with the control arm, obviously the axle bolt. We have two nuts. The top of the nut is the vinyl nut that holds the whole housing together. The castle nut for the axle. Two AN bolts for the pre-drilled. We do sell it undrilled. I don't have any of those currently, but this is something we can have pre-drilled for you. So those come with that. It also comes with the different washer configuration for the spacing in between the wheel. You'll have a cotter pin which holds the castle nut on the end of the axle, and then the Belleville washer, which is obviously a very important part, and we'll get to that here in just a second. So first thing we want to do is to make sure that we have a proper fit. And typically what that entails is you're going to take out your control pin. This is the pin that will lock the mechanism, and it locks your rudder and your rudder pedals with the tail wheel. And typically as we do, we open this up and you'll take out your two components to the control pin. And this thing here, I try and check it before these go out. What sometimes you'll find is there's a little burr on the back of these from the machining process. If that's the case, you can take a very small Vixen file and you can essentially just kind of file those elements off, because what you're trying to do is get this to be a completely unimpeded motion in and out of this. So as I mentioned before, what I do is before everything ships, I will take a very small Vixen file, whether it's a rectangular or a semicircle. It just has to have a flat edge, and I will go in and I will file this down with the control pin before it's sent out. Now sometimes I miss it, sometimes things can happen. So what we're going to check for is that this control pin goes in without any sort of friction or any sort of locking. Now this one obviously is a fresh one, hasn't been done, so we're going to go ahead and open this up. Do as much filing as you feel comfortable. You can always take off more metal, you can't put it back. And I'm going to try and get all edges, all sides, top, bottom. You can do the lip, make sure to get the metal out of there. Again, place it inside, and that's the operation we're looking for. It usually doesn't take much. It's just a little bit of filing on the inside, and again, sometimes you'll have to file the actual pin itself. Then we're going to take the yoke. We will press the pin in with our thumb. Now be careful, this is spring-loaded. So if this pin gets pushed and you let go of it, it's going to shoot out. You're going to be ordering another one from me. So we'll push it in, take that, and you'll slide it on until the pin locks into the mechanism. And here's the action we're trying to test, is back and forth like this. There should not be any sort of restriction with that. And again, to take this off, whether it's on the plane or you're operating it before you install it, you motion it and then use your thumb and start the exit of the yoke. Now this is a trick. You do not pull that off, you push it off with your thumb. You let your hand slowly push up, and then ultimately that will catch right on the top of your thumb. If you pull this off and this thing is facing the other direction, you will not find that pin. Ask me how I know. Now that we have the pin fully installed and we've checked the action to make sure that this has no obstructions, no issues with being operated. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the axle is cleared out. Now these are powder coated, so typically the powder coating material will be what you can find it inside the wheel. So best thing to do is to take a 3/8" drill bit and clear that out. And what that'll allow you to do is make sure that it's just a very slip fit as you put your axle in. Now it will come in a package here, but I've got an extra one. So ultimately you can just check the clearance with that and you shouldn't have any issues with the spacing. So now what we'll do is we'll take our standard tail wheel, and this is a configuration that you're going to have to determine for your aircraft, and ultimately we send quite a bit of different size washers with it, but ultimately you're going to have to figure out for your spacing and your size. All right, now that we've got our tail wheel assembled, and again, what you're going to have to do is determine how much spacing you would like, and in particular how many size washers you want on either side. So this is going to have probably about one more on either side. I'll probably maybe even put in an L and a couple of thin washers just to make sure my fit is correct. This one, it can't quite get to the cotter pin, so this obviously has to get tightened up just a little bit more. So that's some fine tuning you can do on your side once you decide how your tail wheel is going to fit for your operation. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the mechanics of this, in particular how we want to protect this. As I mentioned before, in taking this off, these do not come. Let me go ahead and save my pin here. These do not come pre-oiled or pre-greased. So your choice of lubricant is going to be completely up to you. I happen to use just some Aeroshell 22. And best way to lubricate that is either just with your finger. You can use some rubber gloves, keep your fingers clean if you choose. Just go in, do a scoop, and really what you're trying to do is, in particular on the rod bearings, is get your finger in there and roll them all the way around. You're trying to get all of that to seat, trying to get the lubrication in between the rods and the housing, and so you do that quite a bit. As we're cleaning it, it's also going to be important to get all of that out. So whether this is mounted on the plane and you're cleaning it, you're going to take your, I use non-chlorinated brake cleaner, and ultimately spray it in there and just get everything out you can. Usually if I put paper towels underneath, when it's done dropping dirty, carbonized, black gunk, that's typically when I know that it's fairly clean. So brake cleaner is really good for that, and ultimately get that completely scrubbed out. You can use a nylon brush if you'd like. I'll also use a paper towel to get my fingers in there and clean it out before I re-lube it with the grease. You can and also at the end take a little bit and circle the shaft of the fork. This is also going to be important to keep clean. We're also going to check inside our housing for the control pin, just make sure we don't have any rocks or small particles. Clean that out as well. So this whole thing will get a good scrub, and then some more grease, and you can grease the shaft. You're going to try and keep grease off of the threads if possible. Sometimes it gets on there. You can just kind of clean them with a paper towel. It's another thing we want to try and make sure that that final vinyl nut seats correctly. Okay. All right. Now that we've got our fork and our yoke mounted with our control pin in place, now we're going to test fit our control arm. This control arm can be fit to either side. You'll notice that it keyways with the control pin. So whether you have your control arm on the passenger side or the pilot side is completely up to you. It's your preference. But as you can see, the fit on that is very, very tight. From time to time, it's on occasion, you'll have to do a little bit of deburring of this, but it is machined for us, so that typically doesn't happen. But you will notice that the fit on that is very, very tight, and that's exactly what we're looking for. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is install our Belleville washer. Now, you can see your Belleville washer has kind of a crown to it. The center of it, if you flip it over and it looks like a bowl, that's upside down. If you flip it upright side up, the center of it should be higher and it should taper to the outside. This is because we want to hold the control arm and not the control pin. So that's the reason why we want to grab it, so that we're not compressing it to the incorrect component. Otherwise it locks it up and it won't move. Then we're going to take our vinyl nut and we're going to screw this on. You'll be able to use a ratchet and a socket and wrench this down. Now, big key to this is to make sure that this is not meant to be torqued nice and tight. The vinyl will keep it locked and in place. We want to take it down until it seats against the Belleville washer and the wheel has complete and total movement. Any restriction, if you tighten this nut down too far, you will not be able to turn this, or you will feel that it is too tight to turn. We don't want that. It is meant to be a nice, loose, very slightly snug fit, and ultimately seat against the top of the Belleville washer, and that will seat against the top of the control arm. Okay, so here we have it already installed on the aircraft. This is my airplane. And ultimately what we're going to talk about is, again, from an installed perspective, when doing the maintenance on this, we're going to take out the axle, we're going to drop the fork out so the nut's going to come off, we're going to check the lock nuts on both the front end and the back end of the steering link. We're going to check all of our AN bolts and hardware to make sure that everything is still nice and snug. To basically reverse install this, I like to take the control arm off, so I'll pull the nut off and I will just make sure that I don't have any abrasion or any nicks, fractures in it. These do come pre-greased and we don't want you to open these, so ultimately they've got grease installed, but just want to make sure that I don't have any issues with it. I'll also check my nut on the bottom of the rudder to make sure that it's actuating correctly and installed and I don't have any threads or damage in the vinyl. All right, so basically the best way to get this off, we're going to go ahead and push to one side and get that pin so it's free in there. You can definitely tell this is when it's locked. You'll hear it snap in place, and that's when it connects with the rudder. So we're going to take it off to one side, 30 degrees, one side or the other. You'll hear that pin release and go inside. That allows you to free it from the mechanism. So we're going to go ahead and back this off. And you can brace on one side or the other. Okay, and remember, I'm going to take it almost all the way out, and remember that that pin has been disengaged from the locking in the back. So if I pull that nut, this thing's going to drop and I'm going to lose that control pin. So I'm going to bring it back to the control locking point in the back. I'm going to take my nut off, holding upward pressure on the fork. So this comes off. There's my Belleville washer, just like that. You can see there's some fresh grease in there because I did this just recently, okay? So now this is locked in the back, so it's not going anywhere. So in other words, to get it off, I'm gonna take my pin, and now I'm gonna drop it out. Now once it starts this process, I'm gonna point it back towards me so that control pin goes directly aft, and I'm gonna slowly pull it off, and that pin's gonna lock right up against my thumb, and that's how I keep it from flying out. All right, so I have pre-soaked this rag with quite a bit of brake cleaner, so it's a little damp. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to clean off my parts. Just make sure that there's no abrasions to it, there's no nicks. Take out the spring, make sure that's nice and clean, check the back. And so that is nice and free of debris. I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom of the vinyl nut. Just go in, make sure that there's nothing on it. And same thing with the Belleville washer. Now again, this is nice and greased up because I did this not too long ago, but ultimately we're going to do it again just to make sure that the operation is correct. Now I'm going to take, again, a rag, and you can see a little bit of buildup of the grease on top. So any excess grease that you put in from the last time or the first time will ultimately get pushed out the top and the bottom. So I'm just going to take that rag, wipe it off, wipe off the bottom. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to squirt some brake cleaner down into the yoke, and what you'll notice is it falls onto the ground. You'll get quite a bit of blackening and debris. This one, as I mentioned before, was done fairly recently, so there's not a whole lot that should be in here because ultimately I keep mine very, very clean. And then I'm going to take this, I'm going to wipe off up inside, down from the top. I'm going to get a clean part of the rag and just make sure that I'm not getting any excess. I'm going to spin the rods around in a circle and get them so you can see there's still a little bit of darkness to the liquid that's coming out. Rag's getting cleaner and cleaner. Do some more spinning with it. Looking pretty good. Back up from the bottom. Go one more time here with a clean section of rag. And that's looking really, really clean. Now I'm just going to feel around. I'm going to roll it slowly. I'm going to make sure I don't feel any nicks, burrs, maybe a rock got in there and it nicked up one of the rods, but I don't feel anything. This one looks and feels really, really nice and smooth. Finger's pretty clean. Good. Okay. We're going to use just our Aeroshell 22 grease. This is what I use. You're welcome to use whatever you'd like for things that you normally do your axles with. So I get just a little bit, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do the same thing with cleaning. I'm going to spin it all the way around, and I'm going to try and get that packed into those rods. Make sure that I get it as far back into the housing as I can. You can do this little lip a little bit. Get that wiped off. Look down inside, make sure it's complete. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the axle. Sorry, not the axle, the fork, the shaft on the fork. And I'm just going to take a little bit. This one will pretty much get coated when it gets set up inside, but I like to just do a little bit around the outside. Again, I'm going past the threads so I don't get it on the threads. And if you just want to make sure, just take your rag, do a quick circle around the threads. Okay. Now, we will take our control pin here, and we're going to insert it back into the back. And this one, you have to remember, this has a vertical and sideways. You want the rounded part to go up and down, not sideways. It will not lock correctly. So make sure that that pin goes, it's just like the factory setup. So just double check and make sure, okay? And then we're gonna do the same thing. You can put a little grease down inside of this, which also helps to keep it lubricated and functioning. So we're gonna check the action, make sure there's no nicks, no burrs, and I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna squeeze it, and I'm gonna slowly slide it up, and you'll see it lock. There it is, now it's in place. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and clean off my threads one more time. Now, if this thing spins off, this tail wheel will drop to the floor, so be careful that that pin stays engaged while you're doing this. One more check of the Belleville. No debris, dust, oh, sorry. We're going to install this control arm first. Get that on. Then we're going to take our Belleville, set that on. Take our vinyl nut and cinch this down. All right, so again, now we're going to take this down. You can start to see we're getting almost down to the Belleville washer. And we're going to take it so it's almost finger tight with the ratchet down to where it just starts to seat, just like that. Now, if you swing it back and forth, there's no restriction other than with the mechanics of the hardware itself. We're not pinching it. If we tighten this thing down way too much, this locks and it's too tight and we can't get it to turn. So then we've got to back it off just a little bit. There we go. That allows you to make sure that it doesn't pinch. There's no restriction in movement, restriction in the controllability of this, because that's critical when you're wanting to make sure that it's installed correctly. Now, other thing we're going to check, and you can see here on the back side setup, is I use taper pins to hold my yoke onto the base of this tail spring. Ultimately, this is something you use taper pins and hardware from Aircraft Spruce, and I've got reamers to come in and ream the inside of this. It's a very easy installation. Happy to help you with that. I actually prefer this setup because this taper pin, as the name suggests, it's large on this side, it tapers to this end, and it can only go out in that direction, and then I've spun around and done it opposite in this direction. So I am more than happy to help walk you through that process. I actually think it's much easier than installing the AN hardware, in particular if this is already drilled, and this is something that's already pre-drilled from us when I send it to you, to get a pre-drilled tail spring to line up with a pre-drilled fork and yoke setup is very easy with taper pins, and I'm really able to help you through that process. I rent the reamers and I can send those to you and help you through it. Now, as I mentioned, the last component to this is going to be taking off the tail wheel itself, so this is a little bit different setup than the hardware that you normally get. So we're going to pull the axle. We'll pull all of the spacers, all of the washers on both sides. We'll drop the tail wheel. I'll clean the axle the same as I would anything else using some brake cleaner, taking off all the carbon, all the dust, debris, sand, and then I will re-grease that with some of the Aeroshell 22 grease. I'll also clean the inside of the tail wheel. This is a very easy process, and again, to do all of this, especially if you're doing it every oil change, will take you about 15 to 20 minutes. It's always a good idea to check this before you take it apart when you're planning to do your maintenance, because if you might need a new pin or a new nut, vinyl nut, or a new Belleville washer, or any kind of a component, you can reach out and I can send that to you before you do your maintenance. So that's a very quick how-to on this. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me either by phone or by email. It's a very straightforward process, but once you get good at it, you'll be able to take care of this tail and make sure that the most abused part of the plane is properly mechanically functioning and you don't have any problems with it.